beautiful and how whimsical these are. They're sprinkles for decorating cakes and cookies, and they're made from flowers. The pink ones are crabapple blossoms, and the purple green ones are wild violets. They're incredibly easy to make, and I'm going to show you how to do it. This flowering crabapple is my favorite tree on our whole property, and every spring when it blooms, I try to soak up as much of it as I can because it is fleeting. And because we are foraging today, even though it's in my own front yard, I wanted to give you the disclaimer that it is your responsibility to make sure that you're identifying crabapple and violet blossoms correctly. And once you do that, you can get harvesting. All right, so crab apples. This beautiful pink color, of course, makes a lovely dried flower. And you can pick them when they're open like this, but they'll be a little bit lighter pink just because the petals have stretched out a bit. So I like to pick them when they're just about to open, but not quite. When they're more closed like this, I think they make a darker pink dried flower sprinkle. It's up to you and your preference. I usually pick mostly the closed ones like this, but I always do throw some of the open ones in too, just for a variety of pink color. Picking them is actually really simple and easy, and a lot easier when it's not windy and the tree's not blowing all around. I especially appreciate picking crabapple blossoms because there's no bending over. They're right at eye level, which makes it really nice. So I just focus in on a branch that has a lot of good ones and pluck them. They come off really easily, and then I fill up my cup. And while I'm out here, I'm also going to pick some wild violets, which come up all over our yard, and I absolutely love it. They're one of the first flowers that pops up every spring. And they have the most beautiful color. It is like right between blue and purple, and I just adore them. And so when I'm picking violets to dry for sprinkles, I like to pick them really close to the ground and leave a long stem because I'm going to hang these up in bunches to dry, and it's a lot easier to bundle them together if you leave a long stem. Because violets are such a short plant and they often grow in lawns and on the wood's edge, make sure you know where they're coming from. Make sure that they weren't sprayed with anything. These are, of course, from my own yard, and we don't spray our grass, so I know that they're safe and don't have any harmful chemicals on them. And now that I have a bunch of flowers, I'm going to get them inside and get processing them. I just think these are so beautiful. Aren't they gorgeous? And I love that each one has like its own color. They're each just a little bit different, and I think that is so cool. And of course, with flowers, once you pick them, you want to get them drying as soon as possible, right away, don't wait. And for these crabapple flowers, I like to use my dehydrator. You actually don't need a dehydrator for this. They are so thin and so small that if all you do is pluck the petals like this and put them on a screen to dry, they will dry really quick and really well that way too. But using a dehydrator will definitely speed up the process, so I do recommend using one if you have one. As you can see, this is a pretty simple task that doesn't need much instruction, but I did want to give you one little pointer, and that's this. Make sure that when you grab the petals, you grab them near the bottom so you don't rip them in half. You want them to come out kind of whole if possible. I wanted to mention one other thing was that these petals are sticking to my fingers a little bit because I had to pick these flowers when they were wet from rain. If you pick them while they're dry, they're even that much easier to work with. Once you have them all processed, try to spread them out into a thin, even layer if you can. It doesn't matter a ton if they're overlapped or anything like that, so don't fuss over it too much, but do try to spread them out at least a little bit. If you see in your petals that you have little crumbs, just like this, those are from the middle of the flower, the reproductive parts. Don't worry about those. They'll dehydrate down into nothing and can sift right out. And now my favorite dehydrator trick. I use an extra mesh sheet to sandwich the petals because if you don't do this, they are so light that they will just blow around and fly all over the inside of your dehydrator. Into the machine they go. I am going to dehydrate these on the lowest setting, which I think is around 90 degrees. I don't need much heat for these. They're going to dry really quickly. Okay, and now the violets, which I do a little bit differently, actually quite a bit differently than the crab apples. I am just going to bundle these up, and I like to make fairly small bunches, probably no thicker than the width of my thumb. So I'll grab a little posy here and put them all together, and then I'm just using a regular old twist tie to bunch them up. And this maybe takes a teeny bit of finesse because you want to put the twist tie on really tightly, but you don't want to totally mash and break the stems. And it needs to be tight because as these dry, they're going to shrink, and if they're too loose, they'll just fall right out of the bundle. I find twist ties to be just really quick and easy, and I always have them around right in my kitchen, but you could also use pretty much anything. You could use string, you could use yarn, you could use sewing thread, dental floss, whatever you have, anything that will just hold a little bundle of flowers together. And if you're in a real hurry to dry these, because hanging them up does take a few days to a week for them to fully dry, if you want to dry them a lot quicker, you could put them in the dehydrator. I would cut the flower heads off first, cut them from the stems, kind of similar to how we did the crab apples, and you could put them in the dehydrator as well. And now that I have all these little bunches made, I'm going to go find a string or some kind of twine to hang them from and a place to hang them. I hung these upside down and I decided to hang them from this hutch in my dining room. The criteria I was looking for was that it was out of sunlight, out of the way, and had pretty good airflow. My crabapple blossoms are done drying. These only took a half a day on the dehydrator, maybe even like 6 hours until they were crispy and dark. Look at the beautiful color that they turned. It's kind of a burgundy or almost a wine color. They're just really beautiful. These will be perfect for cupcakes or cakes, especially on the backdrop of a really nice like white or cream or even a light pink frosting. Won't that be pretty? The final step is, of course, just to package them up, and I'm going to use this mesh tray liner to help me wrangle them a little bit and pour them a little bit easier into a jar, and that's how I'm going to store them. I'm going to keep them in a glass jar with a tight-fitting lid. They do need to be in an airtight container, and I always prefer glass for that as opposed to something like a plastic bag. I think glass is a little bit better. And these petals, when stored properly and kept out of sunlight, will last a good year in dry storage. One other thing I wanted to mention is that if you want a smaller sprinkle, you can just use a scissors to clip them into smaller pieces. Some of these petals were quite large, which is kind of nice if you're doing like a bigger cake, but for something like a cupcake, I like them to be a little bit smaller, a little bit daintier, just like this. And then the violets. These have been drying, hanging up for about a week now. They are dry through and through, nice and crispy. And I'm just going to use the scissors to clip the little flower heads off. And you can see here, one of the reasons I like to dry these on the stem whole like this is because I really love the whole flower head, and I really like how it's both green and that really deep purple blue. I think those two colors are just stunning together. And if you don't want that, if you only want the purple color, you can actually just take the scissors and snip the blue purple part right from the green part. Just cut it right off, lop it off, and you'll get just the blue petals, which is also nice. Or if you like the blue and green but you want a smaller sprinkle, you can just pull the petals from the head into smaller pieces like that. Or you can do what I did with the crab apples and put them into a dish and chop them up with the scissors. There's just so many different ways that you can treat these and so many different ways to use them. There were some longer stems that I just separated off to the side because I don't really want those. And just like the crabapple blossoms, I'm going to store these in an airtight container in a jar. And one thing that I like to do is I don't know yet how I'm going to use these exactly, so I'm just going to leave them whole. And then if I want to break them down smaller, I can do that later. And that's it. Beautiful, natural flower sprinkles ready to adorn all of your cakes. Let me know if you have any questions. And if you found this video helpful, I would love it if you could give it a thumbs up. And make sure to subscribe to my channel so that you are the first to know whenever a new video is posted.